April 5, 1917, south of Douai. Six new two-seaters from No. 48 Squadron push east in clean formation. In the lead sits Captain William Leaf Robinson, the same man who downed a Zeppelin over London months earlier, now guiding an unfamiliar type, the Bristol fighter. Curt orders: tight spacing, eyes fixed ahead, no weaving, no slashing. Doctrine says they are to fly like a photographic machine with guns, not like a hunter. 10 minutes later, 4 of those 6 fall in flames or land shattered behind enemy lines. A single patrol erased, one new design written off as a failure before lunch. The statistic stings: 2 out, 4 lost, on the first day the Bristol goes to war. The surprise is not the loss, it is what happens next. Because the same airframe that staggered into bloody April as a victim reappears weeks later as a predator, fighting not like a lumbering spotter, but like a single-seat scout with a sting in both directions. German aces, who had mocked British two-seaters as clumsy prey, began to give one of them a new name and a new respect. The Bristol F2B, Biff, or Brisfit, turned derision into caution, and caution into fear. The transformation hinged on one decision: stop flying the Bristol as a two-seater and start fighting it as a fighter. The war in the air in early 1917 is a machine of attrition. The Arras offensive is days away. Allied commanders demand photographs of batteries, trench lines, movement behind the forward zone. Reconnaissance is fuel. Artillery shoots by map and plate. In this system, two-seaters are workhorses and victims. The recipe is familiar. A pilot holds a steady line. The observer pivots on a scarf ring to guard the rear arc. Escorts try to drive off attackers. It is a doctrine built for cameras, not for blows. It works until the sky fills with scarlet noses and black crosses. The enemy answer is elegant and ruthless. German Jagdstaffeln ride in packs, climbing on the eastern sun, diving on stragglers, then climbing again before Allied escorts can pivot. The logic is simple. A rigid two-seater loses initiative. The moment it climbs steadily for a shot, it dies. That is the expectation that meets the Bristol's debut. The Bristol fighter itself, on paper, offers promise. A powerful Rolls-Royce Falcon engine, over 200 horsepower and climbing with each variant. A forward-firing Vickers synchronized to the propeller. A flexible Lewis gun for the observer on the ring. A clean biplane with a small frontal area and good control harmony. It is not a lumbering farm cart. It is fast for its class. It dives well. It turns tightly for a two-seat machine. But paper promises do not matter if flown like a target. That morning near Douai hands the enemy an easy lesson. The Bristols hold course as taught. Josta 11 cuts down through the British formation, splits it, and rips the boxes apart. The Bristol's forward gun, its fighter heart, goes underused. The observer's field of fire narrows as angles compress. 4 machines go down. The type's reputation goes with them. By April 6th, the rumor is everywhere. The new Bristol is a death trap. But the numbers tell a different story by the end of the month. Because a handful of crews begin breaking the rules. Instead of flying as a camera bus, they fly like a pair of single-seaters back-to-back. Instead of holding formation as doctrine demands, they weave, dive, extend, and climb. The pilot uses his Vickers as the primary weapon. The observer becomes an independent shooter, not a desperate shield. Attacks begin head-on and from above, not as a flat defensive circle. And when the enemy overshoots, the Bristol's rear gun speaks at a range that punishes impatience. The change is small on paper. In practice, it reverses the psychology of the fight. By April 12th, the first reports of Bristol patrols returning with kills, not just survivals, start to appear from 48 Squadron. The pilots who live to write them do not talk of hovering in the center of a pinwheel. They talk of rolling into the attack like scouts, firing the forward gun first, then trusting the observer to rake any pursuer. The Bristol is flown into the enemy, not away from him. Its turning circle, once wasted maintaining close box formation, is spent cutting into the German arc. It stops being passive. It starts being dangerous. What happened next made the pattern obvious. Once the Bristol's pilot flies offensive, the machine's structural virtues suddenly matter. It holds energy in the dive without shedding struts. It does not wallow in the turn. It can sprint out of a bad spot, especially with the Falcon 3. And with 2 guns speaking in 2 arcs, a single Bristol can engage from approach to break. Not one shot, but layers. Not one angle, but 2. German pilots who once laughed at two-seaters begin to peer harder before turning in. That shape ahead, tailplane broad, nose lean, observer upright, may not be the easy mark they think. And if they misjudge, the Bristol punishes. By May, the Brisfit reputation is spreading across mess tables, both sides of the line. It is not invincible, no machine is, but it is suddenly credible, a two-seater that wants to be in the fight, a two-seater that thinks like a fighter. The pivot rests on crews who treat the airframe as a partner, not a prison. Names surface and recur in mess talk. Andrew Edward McKeever, a Canadian with a cool attack rhythm, using the forward gun to tear open a formation and the observer's Lewis to break off the jackal on his tail. Alfred Atke, a patient stalker who keeps his machine in the thick and trusts his observer fully. Keith Park, a New Zealander learning the geometry of patrol fighting. Later the man who will orchestrate an island's defense, here honing timing over the trenches in a two-seater that demands precise choices. Their observers form the other half of the system. Leslie Powell riding the scarf ring like a turret in motion. Charles Gass with a quick eye for the pivot that turns a pursuer into a target. Pilot and observer begin to speak without words. A twitch of aileron means stand by. A quick throttle chop means brake left, brace. A sudden steepening of the dive means forward gun now, then your turn. Small adjustments add up. The Bristol's crew learned to load extra drum magazines for the Lewis, double-clipped to save seconds, to keep the Vickers feed clean, to rehearse hand signals in the hangar until the gestures are automatic. They learned to fire short, concentrated bursts, not streams, because ammunition has a rhythm and weight, and the Bristol can stay out long if it conserves. What does this look like in a fight? It looks like a Bristol patrol threading into a German flight rather than skirting it. First pass head-on. Pilots Vickers playing at long convergence, not to kill, but to fracture cohesion. Climb through the merge, quarter roll, present the observer's arc to the nearest pursuer. A 2-second burst, separation of 80 yards. A stream of nickel-jacketed 303 rounds walking the line of the Albatross's right wing. Fabric cavitates. The enemy rolls to unload. The Bristol's pilot pushes over, trades altitude for smash, and hooks into the next target. In the moments after the initial collision, the Bristol's two arcs of fire are never quiet. Don't imagine heroics unmoored from the system. The system still drives the day. Air war remains arithmetic. Patrol sizes, climb rates, fuel loads, time on station, and the location of the sun. But once crews accept that the Bristol's strengths live in initiative, not in defensive geometry, the arithmetic tilts. A pair of Bristols, flown like fighters, can contest space against a larger group of single-seaters, not through aerobatic miracles, but through discipline. Attack angles, mutual support, energy management, and that second gun. By July 1917, the type is proliferating. Number 22 Squadron trades older two-seaters for the Bristol and brings the new doctrine with it. Training notes shift. Instructors, once focused on photography patterns, add fighter tactics to the syllabus for Bristol crews. Use height, attack first. The forward gun is not just to warn off. The observer is not just to deter. The observer's seat, once treated as supporting cast for a camera, turns into a fighting station with primacy at key moments. The scarf ring, ingenious in its full-circle freedom, becomes a weapons system in its own right when matched with a pilot who can place it where it matters. A ritual forms on the line before takeoff. Pilot and observer check each other's sights. Observer taps Lewis drum stack twice, counts. Pilot runs the Falcon up to even RPM, listens to the beat. They nod. No speech. The Bristol leaps forward with more eagerness than a typical two-seater, nose light as the Falcon pushes hard. Once airborne, the pilot side slips to test rudder authority. The observer swivels, finding the bumps in the ring that snag if not oiled. They climb to a layer where the air is cold but clean, and they wait, not to be pounced but to pounce. The numbers reinforce the shift. In April, the Bristol's loss rate looks terminal. In May and June, victory claims by Bristol crews climb sharply, while losses slow. Claims outpace confirmations, a universal truth of the air war, but the ratio improves. Crews that survive a dozen patrols often survive a dozen more. It is less that the Bristol cannot be cornered. It is that it refuses to enter a corner without a plan to draw blood on the way out. The Germans take notice. Jasta leaders brief their men. Do not underestimate the Bristol. Do not hang on its tail in a long, straight pursuit. Do not assume a split S will escape it in the dive. If you bounce one, kill it quick. If you miss, extend hard and re-enter from a fresh angle with your wingman inside your turn. If you are alone against two of them, think twice. Not fear, exactly. Respect. Respect driven by dead peers. Consider one grinded-out day over the shell-pitted fields near Cambrai, late in 1917. A pair of Bristols from No. 22 Squadron slides into a German reconnaissance path, low sun at their back. The pilot keys his attack line not by bravado but by wind drift and the shallow climb of the enemy escort. He drops the nose, lets gravity do the work, hides his intention until the last 2 seconds by holding fire. The first burst breaks the escort's cohesion, the second disrupts its will. By the time the Albatross rein in, the Bristols are already inside their turn circle. What follows is not a dogfight in the romantic sense, no long spirals or tail chases, but a succession of bracketed 2-second engagements, each stacked on the last like gears. That is the Bristol's late 1917 signature, a machine that turns a legendary 2-seater vulnerability, the small initiative debt, into a debt aggressively repaid with interest. By early 1918, the type's legend hardens behind specific names and dates. Reports from the front speak of days when a pair of Bristols engage a formation several times their size and come home. Pilots and observers return white-faced, hands aching, clothing streaked with castor oil, and the ground crew scrawl new roundels on the cowlings to mark claims. Not mythical, not clean. They know many of those enemy machines went down smoking but landed, but a clear sign of confidence. The observer's forearms harden from the split shoulder stance the scarf ring demands. The pilot's necks thicken from constant checks. The Bristol's material evolution matters too. The F2A that stumbled into April gives way to the F2B with a stronger Falcon, a little more speed, a little more climb, a refined radiator installation, and detail fixes learned at cost. Performance edges sharpen. In a straight line, the best German scouts may still hold a narrow speed edge, but in a dive, the Bristol keeps pace, and in a turn, the Brisfit surprises. With 2 up and full ammunition, it will not match a single-seater's pure, flat circle. Yet in a rolling fight, it holds energy well enough to stay inside the window where both guns can be brought to bear. A small adjustment in cam timing. A little less drag from refined struts. Fractions turn into seconds. Seconds decide fights. There is a myth that all 2-seaters are plodding mules. The Bristol breaks that, not by magic, but by numbers. Speed enough to close, climb enough to reposition, control harmony enough to aim the nose, and the unique leverage of a second brain and a second gun. Not one pilot improvising, 2 airmen integrating. Not one barrel to cycle, 2. Then comes a day that crystallizes the change. May 7th, 1918. Morning light. 2 Bristols from No. 22 Squadron lift off to patrol. In one sits Captain Alfred Ackey with his observer, Lieutenant Charles Gass. In the other, Lieutenant W.F.J. Harvey with Lieutenant A.S. Barrow. They climb to their patrol height, a layered gray over a landscape stitched with trenches and road lines. Ahead, a cluster of specks grows to a swarm, a large enemy formation. Reports will vary, as they always do under adrenaline, but certainly many more than 4 men can rationally accept. There should be only one outcome. 2 2-seaters, outnumbered, should break off, call for support, or die. Instead, these 2 dive. First pass, pilot's guns. The formation fractures. Second pass, observers rake the overshoot. Third pass, climbing into sun, a short burst finds a radiator. More turns, more switchbacks. Some enemy break off, some commit and pay. When it is over, the 2 Bristols drag home full of holes but whole. Their claims are high, higher than confirmation will bear. But the bigger truth lands with them. In the right hands, the Bristol can skew an engagement so far off script that arithmetic briefly bends. This is not a rule to be followed by all. The Bristol is not a miracle. The history of the type is splashed with losses. Crews die learning lessons. Others die despite flying perfectly. A patched fuel line or a momentary jam can flip the ledger. But across 1917 and 1918, the general line turns upward. The type that entered the war despised for its first-day slaughter exits it praised as the backbone of aggressive 2-seat fighting. On the German side of the front, anecdotes mirror the change. Jagdstaffel leaders brief their Ketten with new caution. If it is a Bristol, assume the pilot will turn to face you. Assume the observer is waiting. Assume the head-on is not theater. And when reports come in of lost pilots, the cause is sometimes written simply Bristol, not two-seater. A name, not a category. That shift in language is the quiet measure of respect. What precisely changed? The answer sits at 3 levels. First, tactics. On April 5th, pilots held a compact box and let fights come to them. By April 20th, they break and rejoin like single-seat flights. They use nose attitude as communication, not only as aerodynamics. They enter engagements on their own terms, not the enemy's. The observer's ring is treated as a dynamic sightline, not a last-ditch shield. This makes the Bristol a machine with overlapping offensive cones, not a single rearward arc of defense. It ups the cost of attacking from behind and turns head-on, merges into lethal coin tosses that the British are willing to take. Second, training and crew integration. The best Bristol crews drill like pairs in a dance. In debriefs, they speak of rhythm, pilot bursts lasting 1 or 2 seconds, observer bursts matched to overshoots, breaks timed to the reload cadence. They talk of prearranged hand signals, ready routines for jams, and standardized positions for spare drums. In a world where seconds decide a life, this reduces uncertainty. Confidence replaces caution. Caution had kept them alive. Confidence now makes them dangerous. Third, the machine itself. The Falcon engine gives thrust at the right moments. The structure takes dive loads and hard pulls. The forward Vickers is reliable when maintained. The rear Lewis, in trained hands, is a scythe. The airframe's layout makes both guns easy to point where they matter. All of this turns what could have been a camera truck into a gun platform that moves like a scout. Why does this matter beyond a few squadrons' war stories? Because the Bristol forces a doctrinal correction that ripples beyond the Western Front. Two-seaters need not be slow, passive, escort-dependent. They can contest the sky in their own right if designed and flown for agency. The lesson echoes forward. In later wars, the most feared two-seat machines will be those that fight like fighters, fast, well-armed, able to turn an engagement on their terms. There is irony, too. The Bristol's early failure near Douai is what made its later success possible. The shock of loss breaks the rigidity of old doctrine. Commanders who might have insisted on box formations and steady courses watch 4 machines vanish in minutes and allow their crews to improvise. The war's violent feedback loop, brutal but honest, prunes bad ideas fast. The personal cost is harder to square. William Leaf Robinson, the Zeppelin killer who led those first Bristols over the line, went down that day and did not return to combat. He would die of illness before the war's end. Many others followed in the weeks after, before the doctrine settled. For every man who learned to swing a Bristol like a rapier, another paid in blood for the experiment. The Bristol's legend is not just a story of a clever airframe or a smart tactic. It is a ledger filled with names, each a step on the path from victim to hunter. By summer's end in 1918, the visual grammar of the front has shifted. German aces, once happy to dive on a two-seater and ride its tail, begin to break off sooner when they recognize the broad tailplane and compact nose of a Bristol. They adjust their pattern. One distracts, one angles for the pilot, another waits for the observer to commit before rolling into his blind spot. Even then, they do not always win. The Bristol's counter remains the same. Attack first, layer fire, refuse the corner, and punish the overshoot. If this is true locally, it follows system-wide. Reconnaissance flights gain freedom. Artillery shoots more accurately. Patrol lines hold a little farther forward. Losses do not collapse. They never do in this sky. But the exchange rate improves where Bristols fly as fighters. That improvement magnifies. Each photograph brought back, each battery plastered by corrected fire, each enemy patrol pushed off a route, compounds at the level of corps plans and flowing logistics. The Bristol is not just a killer. It is a facilitator. The numbers at scale are imprecise. Claims always are, but the tilt is clear. Across the last 18 months of the war, Bristol crews rack up scores that place them among the most effective two-seat fighters of the conflict. Dozens of airmen become aces in a machine that was not originally purchased to make aces. Some find themselves with tallies rivaling the best single-seat pilots. They do it not alone, but in partnerships, pilot and observer sharing a record, a rhythm, a survival. Then the armistice comes. The Bristol is not retired as a bad gamble. It remains in service, a design that has earned trust. In peacetime, it becomes a trainer and a patrol machine. In memory, it becomes a case study, a weapon system that learned to be used correctly under fire. Now return to the opening image, April 5th, 1917, a line of 6 turns toward Douai. The lead pilot glances back once at his men, then forward into the sun. In that scene, the Bristol is a question mark with a tragic answer. But by late 1918, the same silhouette carries a different meaning. When German formations glimpse that open cockpit pair, a pilot already banking into them, an observer already lifting his Lewis, they know the lesson the Bristol forced on the air war. Initiative is armor. Not the thickest plate, not the fastest climb, not the tightest circle, but the decision to act first, to carry a second angle of fire into the merge, to fight like a fighter though you carry 2 in the cockpit. It reframes everything. The thesis lands in a single line. The Bristol F2B was not a 2-seater that survived dogfights. It was a fighter that happened to have 2 men aboard. Through that lens, the German laughter at Allied scouts fades into something quieter and heavier. Respect, caution, the checked dive, the shorter burst, the earlier break, the knowledge that some prey had learned to bite back. In the final weeks, crews who once expected to drift home behind escorts now go looking for trouble, but not foolishly. They climb with sun advantage. They keep their ammunition dry and their bursts short. They talk through their hands. They move their machine as one, and when the moment comes, they dive first. The war ends. The Bristol's wake extends beyond it. Aerial combat doctrine will never again assume that a second seat means a second-rate fighter. Designers will look at that long nose, that compact wing, that ring gun, and see not a compromise, but a concept. Not through better armor, but through better use. Not through more guns, but through smarter arcs. Not by waiting to be attacked, but by attacking. 2 men in an open cockpit, learning that lesson at speed, rode it into the sky 1 burst at a time. Then they throttled back and came home, engines ticking, hands shaking, fuel low, the air around them quiet at last.